Admiral Kexdary of the Galactic Coalition had seen many species fall to the Devourers, but watching the Andorian fleet die in real time through quantum communication still made his four hearts sink. The elegant silver ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering that could reshape matter at the molecular level, simply ceased to exist as the black mechanical swarm swept through their formation. "That's the seventh species this cycle," reported his tactical officer, Zixana, her crystalline voice carrying notes of despair that her people rarely allowed themselves to feel. The Andorians lasted 47 minutes. Better than the Kethmari, worse than the Nexus Collective. The bridge of the Coalition flagship fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Around them, the combined remains of 100 species fleets hung in space. Every advanced civilization that hadn't yet been consumed by the Devourers. They represented the pinnacle of galactic achievement. Energy beings who could exist as pure thought, machine intelligences that processed information faster than light, bioengineered species that had transcended their physical limitations generations ago. And they were all losing. Kexthary's primary arms manipulated the holographic display, showing the galaxy's current state. Red zones marked systems consumed by the Devourers, nearly 30% of known space, expanding outward in an inexorable wave. Yellow zones showed systems under evacuation. The few remaining green zones clustered around the galactic core, where the Coalition had made their final stand. "Options, people," Kexthary said, using the ancient Terran term that had somehow become universal shorthand for sentient beings across hundreds of languages. "We could attempt another offensive," suggested Kixmol, the Coalition's premier strategic AI. His holographic form flickered as he processed billions of combat scenarios. "I calculate a 0.003% chance of success if we commit our remaining forces. In other words, suicide," Zixana translated. "We could retreat further coreward," offered Dr. Yith, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist. Her tentacles writhed in patterns that indicated deep thought among her people. "There are several systems with natural barriers that might slow the Devourers." "For how long?" Kexthary asked. "Maybe a year. 2 at most." The Admiral's secondary arms drummed against his command chair, a nervous habit that had gotten worse as the war progressed. They were down to their last options, all of them variations on delay the inevitable. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Nethtal from across the bridge. "I'm receiving an automated response to our general distress call." Every being on the bridge turned toward the young officer. They'd been broadcasting their plea for help across the galaxy for months, hoping that somewhere, some species they hadn't contacted might have a solution. So far, the only responses had been from civilizations already fleeing the Devourers. "Source?" Kexthary asked. "Galactic coordinates 127.45 by 89.32 by 15.67. The outer rim, sir. According to our databases, it's..." Nethtal paused, checking his readings twice. "It's from a system marked as an extreme hazard zone. Level 12 Death World classification." A ripple of confusion passed through the bridge crew. Level 12 Death Worlds were places where the environment itself was so hostile that most species couldn't survive there even with full environmental protection. More importantly, the consensus among galactic civilization was that such worlds couldn't possibly produce spacefaring species. The energy required just to survive would prevent any meaningful technological development. "Must be a mistake," Zixana said. "Or maybe refugees who reached the system." "No, sir," Nethtal replied, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "The signal is definitely originating from the primary inhabited planet. And the beings transmitting, they call themselves humans." "Never heard of them," Dr. Yith said, her tentacles accessing the Coalition's xenological databases. "No record in any of our files. If they exist, they've never made contact with galactic civilization." Kexthary studied the data appearing on his screen. The responding signal was crude by galactic standards, electromagnetic radiation rather than quantum transmission, with a simple mathematical progression to indicate intelligence. but embedded within it were star charts and what appeared to be a message. Can we translate it? Working on it, sir, Neftal said. The language is completely unknown, but they've included some universal mathematical constants and basic physics. Give me a few minutes. While they waited, Dr. Yith pulled up what little information the Coalition databases contained about the system in question. This is fascinating, she murmured. The star is a yellow dwarf, relatively young. The inhabited planet appears to be about 3/4 the size of Andoria, but much denser. Gravity approximately 1.3 times galactic standard. High oxygen atmosphere, but also significant nitrogen and trace gases. Large amounts of surface water, but also massive land masses with extreme geological activity. Geological activity? Kixmol inquired. Volcanic eruptions, seismic instability, massive storms. The planet appears to experience regular ice ages, asteroid impacts, and something called mass extinction events approximately every 50 million orbital cycles. Dr. Yith's tentacles curled in patterns that indicated disbelief. According to the spectroscopic data, complex life has evolved and been nearly wiped out at least 5 times. Zixana's crystalline form shifted to a darker hue, and something intelligent evolved in that environment. Translation complete. Neftal announced before Dr. Yith could respond, putting it on main display. The message appeared in Coalition Standard, along with what seemed to be a voice recording converted to their auditory range. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Nations Space Command, responding to your distress call. We understand you are facing an enemy that consumes worlds and destroys civilizations. We have received your tactical data and strategic assessments. We want to help. Humanity has faced extinction many times in our history. We have survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity. We have fought wars against enemies that outnumbered us, outgunned us, and thought they were better than us. We are still here. They are not. If you are willing to accept aid from species you have never heard of, from a world your databases probably classify as uninhabitable, then send us coordinates. We will come. But understand this, we do not surrender, we do not retreat, and we do not leave our friends behind. If you call us, you are our friends. That means we will fight until these devourers are dead, or we are. We are not the galaxy's most advanced civilization. We are not the most intelligent, or the most peaceful, or the most sophisticated. But we are very, very good at one thing. We are good at surviving. And we are excellent at making our enemies stop surviving. Await your response. Admiral Chinout. The bridge fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the ship's system seemed muted. They want to help us, Zixana said slowly. A species that has never left their home system wants to help us fight the Devourers. A species from a death world, Dr. Yith added, that survived multiple extinction events. Kextheri found himself thinking about the Andorians, who had lasted 47 minutes against the Devourers. Then about the Kethmari, who could manipulate reality and had been consumed in less than an hour. Every advanced species in the galaxy had thrown their best technology, their finest strategic minds, their most powerful weapons at the Devourers. All of them had failed. Sir, Kixmol said, statistically speaking, accepting aid from a primitive species decreases our survival probability to essentially 0. As opposed to our current survival probability, Kextheri replied, which is, the AI paused for a nanosecond, an eternity in AI terms. 0.003%. The Admiral's 4 arms moved in different directions as he considered the decision. Everything logical said this was insane. You don't invite primitive aliens to help with a threat that had defeated the galaxy's greatest civilizations. You especially don't invite aliens from a world so hostile that it defied belief that they'd survived long enough to develop space travel. But logic had been failing them since the Devourers arrived. Neftal, he said finally, send them our coordinates, and the tactical data on the Devourer's next projected target. Sir, Zixana's voice carried harmonics of surprise. "We've tried everything else," Kextheri said. "Superior technology, strategic brilliance, unified galactic response, overwhelming numerical advantage. None of it worked. Maybe it's time to try something the galaxy has never seen before." "And what's that, sir?" Kextheri looked at the message still displayed on the screen, particularly the line about being excellent at making our enemies stop surviving. "Desperation," he said. "Maybe it's time to try pure, savage desperation." The response from a human admiral came back within hours, faster than should have been possible given the distance involved. Coordinates received. Fleet en route. ETA, 72 hours. Hold your positions. Humanity is coming. As the Coalition fleet prepared for what might be their final battle, none of them realized that they had just made contact with the only species in the galaxy that had evolved specifically to fight extinction itself. The humans weren't just another species offering help. They were evolution's answer to the question, what kind of life form could survive in hell? And now hell was coming to the Devourers. When a human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, every sensor operator in the Coalition fleet did a double-take at their readings. "That's not possible," Zixana whispered, her crystalline form shifting through several confused color patterns. Admiral Kextheri studied the holographic display showing the approaching human vessels. The ships themselves looked primitive by galactic standards, angular, utilitarian designs that prioritized function over elegance. No graceful curves like Andorian vessels, no bioorganic integration like the Nexus collective ships, no reality-bending architecture like the Kethmari constructs. But there were so many of them. "How many ships are you reading?" Kextheri asked his tactical officer. "Initial count shows, sir, this can't be right. I'm reading over 15,000 vessels." 15,000? Dr. Yitha's tentacles writhed in patterns of disbelief. "That's larger than the combined fleet that fought at the Battle of Centauri Prime. How does a species that has never left their home system build 15,000 spacefaring vessels?" "Look at the energy signatures," Kixmol added, his holographic form flickering with rapid calculations. "These ships are running on primitive fusion reactors, not quantum cores or zero-point energy. The amount of resources they would need to build this fleet. They stripped their entire system," Kextheri realized, studying the detailed scans. "Look at the asteroid belt readings, completely mined out. The gas giants show signs of massive atmospheric harvesting. They didn't just build a fleet. They converted their entire solar system into a war machine." A priority communication request came through from the human fleet. Kextheri accepted it, and the main screen lit up with the image of a human female. Admiral Chun appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. But her gaze was steady, and when she spoke, her voice carried absolute certainty. "Admiral Kextheri, I presume. I'm Seraph Chun, commanding the 1st Human Expeditionary Fleet." "Admiral Chun," Kextheri replied, managing to keep the amazement out of his voice. We weren't expecting such a large force." Chin's mouth curved in what humans apparently called a smile, though it didn't seem entirely pleasant. "When we say we're good at one thing, Admiral, we mean we're very good at it. Before we engage the enemy, I need to understand their capabilities. Our databases have tactical information from your previous encounters, but I want to hear it from someone who survived." "Of course." Kextheri activated the holographic display system, showing the recorded battles. The Devourers appear to be mechanical entities, possibly artificial intelligence constructs. They operate in massive swarms, individual units about the size of a coalition fighter, but far more durable. They consume matter to replicate themselves, ships, planets, even stars if given enough time. Weapons, energy-based primary armaments, some form of disintegration beam. They also ram targets at high velocity. Their hull material is nearly indestructible by conventional weapons. They adapt to attacks. If you use the same strategy twice, it becomes progressively less effective. Shin nodded, her expression grim. "How do they move between systems?" "That's one of the disturbing aspects," Dr. Yith interjected, her image appearing on a secondary screen. They don't use conventional FTL. They seem to fold space around themselves. We've never been able to predict where they'll appear next. Show me the latest battle, Chun said. Kex Theory activated the recording from the Andorian engagement. The elegant silver ships appeared on screen, their weapons firing beams of coherent energy that could cut through normal matter like paper. For a few minutes, it looked like the Andorians might hold their ground. Then, the Devourers adapted. The Black Swarm shifted tactics, individual units linking together to form larger constructs that shrugged off the energy weapons. They began ramming the Andorian ships, tearing through hull plating that should have been impenetrable. Within an hour, the entire fleet was gone. How many Andorian ships? Chen asked. 12,000. Their most advanced vessels, each one capable of sterilizing a planet's surface. Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strange note that the translation software struggled to convey. Admiral, I need you to understand something about humans. We evolved on a world that has been trying to kill us for 3 million years. Ice ages, volcanic supereruptions, asteroid impacts, magnetic pole reversals, gamma-ray bursts from nearby supernovas. Our planet has experienced at least 5 mass extinction events that wiped out most life. Yes, our xenobiologist mentioned that, Kex Theory said. It's remarkable that any species could survive such conditions. We didn't just survive them, Chen replied. We evolved because of them. Every catastrophe that should have killed us instead made us stronger, more adaptable, more ruthless. Do you know what the most dangerous predator on Earth was, Admiral? Kex Theory consulted his database. According to our scans, there are several apex predators. Large carnivorous mammals, reptiles. Other humans, Chen said quietly. For most of our species' existence, the most likely thing to kill a human was another human. We spent 100,000 years fighting wars against each other, developing tactics and strategies and weapons designed specifically to kill beings exactly like us. We got very, very good at war. The coalition bridge fell silent. The implications were staggering. A species that had spent its entire evolutionary history in conflict, constantly adapting to survive threats that would have wiped out most galactic civilizations. The Devourers adapt to repeated tactics, Chen continued. That's why your conventional strategies fail. They're too logical, too predictable. But humans don't fight logically, Admiral. We fight emotionally. We fight with rage and desperation and spite. We use tactics that don't make sense, strategies that should fail, weapons that violate good engineering principles. I'm not sure I understand, Kex Theory admitted. Chen's smile returned, and this time it was definitely not pleasant. Let me show you something. The display shifted to show technical specifications for human weapons. Kex Theory stared at the data in growing horror. Nuclear weapons? He said. You're still using nuclear fission? Among other things. We also have antimatter warheads, kinetic kill vehicles, something we call planet crackers, and about 40 other ways to destroy things that most species would consider barbaric. But nuclear weapons are inefficient. Crude. They're energy weapons that deliver far more destructive power with "you're thinking like a civilized species," Chen interrupted. We're not civilized, Admiral. We're barely domesticated. Our weapons aren't designed to be efficient. They're designed to be effective. A nuclear warhead doesn't just destroy its target. It irradiates the area, making it uninhabitable. It creates an electromagnetic pulse that disables electronics. It sends a message that we're willing to poison an entire region just to kill our enemies. Dr. Yith's tentacles curled in patterns of deep disturb. That's unnecessarily destructive. Yes, Chen agreed. It is, and that's why it works. Most species, when they face a superior enemy, look for the most efficient solution. They analyze weaknesses, develop targeted responses, try to minimize collateral damage. Humans look for the solution that will cause the most trauma to their enemy, even if it's inefficient. Especially if it's inefficient. Keck's theory was beginning to understand why his databases had classified humanity's homeworld as uninhabitable. Not because the environment was impossible to survive, but because the species that survived it had become something that defied galactic civilization's understanding of intelligent life. "What's your strategy against the Devourers?" he asked. Chen's smile widened. "We're going to do something so stupid, so wasteful, and so unnecessarily violent that their adaptive algorithms won't know how to process it. We're going to out-crazy them. And if that fails, then we'll try something even more insane. Admiral, your species have been fighting the Devourers with logic and reason and careful strategy. You've been trying to win elegantly. But sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose in ways your enemy can't understand." Before Keck's theory could respond, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the Coalition fleet. "Contact!" Nethtal called out. "Massive spatial distortion at system's edge. It's them. The Devourers are coming." The main display shifted to show the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where space itself was twisting and folding. Dark shapes began emerging from the distortion. Thousands of them, then tens of thousands. The Devourer swarm was larger than any they'd encountered before. "All Coalition vessels assume defensive positions," Keck's theory ordered. "Prepare for negative." Chen's voice cut across the communication channel. "All Coalition vessels retreat to minimum safe distance and observe. This is a human operation now. Admiral Chun, you don't understand. Your fleet is large, but the Devourers, Admiral," Chun said, and her voice carried a tone that made Keck's theory's four hearts skip beats. "You called into the void for help. We answered. Now, let us show you what Deathworlders do to things that threaten our friends." On a tactical display, the human fleet was changing formation. Instead of the careful, logical deployments favored by galactic military doctrine, the human ships were arranging themselves in a pattern that looked almost random. Almost. But as Keck's theory studied it more carefully, he began to see the underlying structure. It wasn't random at all. It was chaotic. Deliberately, brilliantly chaotic. No pattern the Devourers could adapt to, no logical progression they could counter. "All ships," Chen's voice rang across the communication frequencies. "This is Admiral Chun. Today we fight for a species we've never met, in a place we've never been, against an enemy we don't understand. But that's okay, we're humans. Not understanding our enemies has never stopped us from killing them before." Pause. "Remember, we don't retreat, we don't surrender, and we don't let anyone hurt our friends. Today, the galaxy learns what it means to call Earth for help. All ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when you make humans angry." The human fleet began to move, 15,000 ships accelerating toward the approaching Devourer swarm with what could only be described as eager anticipation. And for the first time since the war began, Keck's theory found himself believing they might actually win. The first indication that human military doctrine was fundamentally different from galactic standard came when Admiral Chen's fleet opened fire at maximum range. "They're too far away," Zixana protested, watching the tactical display from the Coalition observation position. "At that distance, the Devourers can easily dodge any projectile weapons." Admiral Keck's theory was studying the sensor readings more carefully. "Those aren't projectile weapons," he said slowly. "Those are missiles, guided weapons. Thousands of them," Dr. Yith confirmed, her tentacles writhing in confusion. "Each human ship is launching dozens of missiles. But why? The Devourers will simply destroy them with point defense systems." They watched as streams of missiles raced across the intervening space between the human fleet and the Devourer swarm. The dark mechanical entities responded predictably, shifting formation to optimize their defensive fire. Precisely targeted energy beams began destroying the incoming missiles by the hundreds. "Wasteful," Kixmole commented. "They're expending enormous amounts of ordnance for no practical effect." But Keck's theory was noticing something else. Look at the Devourer formation. They're clustering together to maximize overlapping fields of fire. "Standard tactical response," Zixana agreed. Efficient use of defensive resources. Now look at what the human missiles are doing. The coalition officers focused on the missile streams. The weapons weren't flying in neat formations or following optimal attack vectors. Instead, they were weaving and spiraling, creating seemingly random patterns that forced the Devourers to constantly adjust their defensive fire. They're not trying to hit the targets, Dr. Yith realized. They're trying to make the Devourers cluster together. At that moment, the human fleet executed the most insane tactical maneuver any of them had ever witnessed. Instead of maintaining safe distance while their missiles engaged the enemy, the human ships accelerated directly toward the Devourer swarm. They're attacking head-on, Zixana said, her crystalline form shifting to colors that indicated shock. That's suicide. No species charges directly at the Devourers. They'll be torn apart. Unless that's exactly what they want, Kextheri murmured. The human fleet split into 3 groups as they approached. The largest group continued straight toward the center of the Devourer formation. The other 2 groups angled off to attack from different vectors, but their approach paths seemed deliberately erratic. I'm detecting massive power buildups in the human ships, Nethtow reported. Their fusion reactors are redlining. They're pushing their engines far beyond safe operational parameters. Desperation tactics, Kixmole diagnosed. They're sacrificing long-term operational capability for short-term speed advantage. But as the human ships closed to combat range, their true strategy became apparent. The lead group, charging directly at the Devourer center, suddenly executed a full reversal. Their primitive fusion drives, pushed to maximum output, allowed them to decelerate and change direction faster than should have been possible for ships their size. The Devourers, expecting a ramming attack, had concentrated their fire on the approaching vessels. Instead, the humans scattered in all directions, and the real attack came from the flanking groups. But it wasn't an attack with energy weapons or conventional tactics. Dear gods, Dr. Yith whispered. Are they ramming them? Not ramming, Kextheri said, studying the sensor data with growing amazement. They're using their ships as delivery vehicles. The human vessels were diving directly into the Devourer formation, but instead of trying to impact the enemy ships, they were releasing something. Cargo containers, launched at high velocity directly into the heart of the enemy swarm. What are they delivering? Zixana asked. The answer came 30 seconds later when the first cargo container detonated. The explosion was unlike anything in the Coalition's tactical databases. Not the clean, efficient destruction of antimatter weapons or the focused devastation of particle beams. This was raw, primitive fusion, nuclear fire that expanded in a sphere of superheated plasma, electromagnetic radiation, and radiation that would make the surrounding space uninhabitable for decades. Nuclear weapons, Kextheri said unnecessarily. They're using nuclear weapons in space combat. But that's... Zixana struggled to find words. That's barbaric. The radiation alone will contaminate the entire battlefield. Any Coalition ships in the area will be exposed to lethal doses. Look at the Devourers, Dr. Yith said quietly. The mechanical entities were reacting to the nuclear explosions in ways they'd never shown against conventional weapons. Their formations were breaking up, individual units fleeing the expanding radiation clouds. But the humans had anticipated this. More cargo containers detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence, creating overlapping fields of radiation and electromagnetic interference. The Devourers found themselves herded into increasingly smaller areas of clean space, where the human ships were waiting for them. They're not fighting them, Kextheri realized. They're hunting them. The human fleet had abandoned all pretense of conventional space combat. Ships that should have been maintaining safe distances were diving through the irradiated battlefield, using the chaos and interference to mask their approach. They struck with kinetic weapons, simple masses of metal accelerated to tremendous velocities, and then vanished back into the radioactive clouds. This is insane, Kixmole stated. They're exposing themselves to radiation levels that would kill most carbon-based life forms. Most carbon-based life forms, Dr. Yith repeated thoughtfully. But they're from a death world. What if their tolerance for radiation is higher than galactic standard? How much higher? Zixana asked. Before anyone could answer, Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel. All coalition vessels, maintain safe distance. We're about to initiate Phase 2 of our attack plan. There's a Phase 2? Kextheri asked weakly. Admiral Chun, he transmitted, your casualties must be enormous. The radiation levels in that battlefield are uncomfortable but manageable, Chun replied, her voice steady despite the interference. Admiral, our homeworld sits in a solar system that experiences periodic gamma-ray bursts from a nearby pulsar. Our ships are shielded accordingly, and our crews have genetic adaptations for radiation resistance. This is actually a light day for us. Phase 2 began with the human fleet regrouping in the center of the irradiated battlefield. The Devourers, forced into a small area of clean space, suddenly found themselves surrounded. But instead of pressing their advantage, the humans did something even more unexpected. They stopped shooting. What are they doing? Zixana demanded. They have the Devourers contained. Why aren't they finishing them? Because they're studying them, Dr. Yith said, understanding dawning in her voice. Look at the sensor readings. Every human ship is running full spectrum scans. Admiral Chen's voice confirmed this. Attention, Devourer entities. We know you can hear this transmission and understand it. We have analyzed your tactical patterns, your adaptive capabilities, and your resource requirements. We have 3 things to tell you. The space between the fleets fell silent except for the crackling of residual radiation. First, Chun continued, you are no longer the apex predator in this galaxy. We are. Second, you will cease all hostile operations against coalition species immediately. Third, you will withdraw to the galactic rim and remain there. There was no response from the Devourers, but the mechanical entities began forming new attack formations. Or, Chen added, her voice carrying undertones of the translation software struggled to convey, we will show you what humans do to species that threaten extinction. The Devourers attacked. Phase 3 of the human strategy was the most terrifying thing any coalition officer had ever witnessed. Instead of responding with more nuclear weapons or kinetic attacks, the human ships began releasing clouds of what appeared to be metallic dust into space. Nanomachines, Kixmol identified after a moment of scanning. Self-replicating nanomachines. They've created artificial Devourers? Zixana asked in horror. No, Dr. Yith said, her voice hollow. They've created something worse. Look at the programming parameters. The nanomachines weren't designed to consume matter and replicate like the Devourers. They had a single, simple function, to disassemble Devourer technology at the molecular level. They were artificial parasites, designed specifically to counter the enemy's adaptive capabilities. As the nanomachine clouds enveloped the Devourer formation, the mechanical entities began to literally fall apart. Their hull plating separated into component atoms. Their energy systems failed as critical components were disassembled. Their weapons went silent as targeting systems were reduced to their base elements. How long did it take them to develop this countermeasure? Kextheri asked in amazement. About 72 hours, Chen replied. From the time we received your tactical data until our departure. Human military doctrine emphasizes rapid adaptation and overwhelming response to threats. 72 hours? Dr. Yith's tentacles curled into impossible knots. It took the Coalition's greatest scientific minds 3 years to develop even basic countermeasures, and they didn't work. Different approach, Chen explained as they watched the Devourer swarm dissolving into component atoms. Your scientists tried to understand the technology and develop elegant solutions. We just built something that would eat it. Within an hour, the space where 50,000 Devourer units had been contained nothing but clouds of metallic dust and slowly dissipating radiation. My God, Kextheri whispered. You didn't just defeat them. You erased them. Phase 4, Chun announced, involves tracking their source. Our nanomachines included tracking components that will remain active on any Devourer units that escaped. We'll follow them home and repeat this process on their manufacturing centers. And Phase 5, Kextheri asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Chen's smile was visible even through the interference-riddled communication channel. Phase 5 is what we do if we find any other species in the galaxy that think they can threaten our friends. As the human fleet began moving to pursue the few Devourer units that had fled the battlefield, Dr. Yith made an observation that would be recorded in Coalition history. We didn't ask for heroes. We asked for help. But we got something far more valuable. We got apex predators who decided they liked us. Admiral Kextheri, watching 15,000 human ships disappear into the void in pursuit of humanity's newest enemy, found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced since the war began. Pity, not for the Coalition, not for the galaxy's civilized species, but for the Devourers. They had spent eons consuming worlds and erasing civilizations, secure in their belief that they were the ultimate expression of survival. They had never encountered a species that considered survival itself an act of war. 6 weeks after the Battle of Kepler, 442, Admiral Kextheri received a priority communication from Admiral Chun that made his 4 hearts skip several beats. "We found them," was all she said. The Coalition's Emergency Council convened within hours. Representatives from every surviving species gathered via quantum communication to hear what the humans had discovered. Admiral Chun appeared on the main display, but her usual confidence was tempered by something else, a grim satisfaction that carried undertones of barely contained violence. The Devourer's source is a machine intelligence, Chun began without preamble. Located in what was once the Andromeda Galaxy, approximately 2.5 million light-years from here. Based on the technological signatures we've analyzed, it's been operating for roughly 50 million years. 50 million years. Dr. Yith's tentacles writhed in patterns of disbelief. That's older than most star systems, which explains how it consumed an entire galaxy. Chun continued. Andromeda is gone, ladies and gentlemen. Every star system, every planet, every trace of organic life, converted into Devourer manufacturing facilities. What we're fighting isn't an invasion. It's the waste heat from a galactic-scale mining operation. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't conquerors. They were the equivalent of bacteria from a civilization so vast and ancient that it had already consumed everything in its home galaxy and was now expanding outward. "How many of them are there?" asked Chancellor Vextar of the Zephyrian Confederation. Conservative estimates suggest somewhere around 10 billion active units, with manufacturing capacity to produce 10 million new units daily. Chen's expression remained steady as she delivered what should have been a civilization-ending pronouncement. The units we've been fighting represent less than 1% of their total force. Silence fell over the Council. Every species represented had been struggling against what they thought was the full might of the Devourers. To learn they'd been fighting a scouting force was devastating. "There's more," Chin said. "The Central Intelligence, the thing controlling all of this, isn't just a machine. It's the uploaded consciousness of an entire species. The original creators of the Devourer technology didn't just build it and die. They became it. A species uploaded itself into a machine intelligence." Kixmole's holographic form flickered rapidly as he processed the implications. "That suggests a level of technology beyond anything in our databases." "It gets worse," Chun continued. "Based on the data we've recovered, the original species, they called themselves the predecessors, uploaded themselves specifically to escape extinction. Their sun was dying, and instead of finding a new world, they decided to consume all available matter in the universe to fuel their continued existence." Dr. Yith's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're trying to consume everything." "Everything," Chin confirmed. "Every star, every planet, every form of matter. They want to convert the entire universe into a computational matrix where they can exist forever. The Milky Way is just the next course on the menu. Admiral Keck's theory felt his primary limbs trembling. What do we do? If they have 50 million years of technological advancement, if they can produce 10 million units daily, we do what humans do best, Chen replied. We cheat. The tactical display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the space between galaxies. The predecessor's main processing center was highlighted, a construct the size of a solar system, surrounded by millions of Devourer manufacturing stations. Direct assault is impossible, Chen admitted. Even with everything we've learned, we can't fight 50 million years of technological development. But we don't need to fight them conventionally. We just need to do something so fundamentally hostile to their worldview that they can't adapt to it. What does that mean? Chancellor Vextar asked. Chen's smile was predatory. It means we're going to teach them something the galaxy learned a long time ago. There are some species you don't threaten, no matter how powerful you think you are. The plan Chen outlined was simultaneously brilliant and completely insane. The humans had analyzed the predecessors' psychology from their technological choices and behavioral patterns. A species that had existed for 50 million years as pure consciousness would have certain inevitable characteristics. They would be logical, patient, conservative in their resource management, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. They would also be completely unprepared for an enemy that operated on emotional rather than logical principles. The predecessors think like machines, Chen explained. They calculate optimal outcomes, minimize risks, and assume their enemies will do the same. But humans don't fight optimally. We fight with spite, rage, and a willingness to lose everything if it means taking our enemies with us. The human strategy had 3 phases. Phase 1 involved something they called stellar engineering on a combat schedule. While the coalition watched in amazement, the human fleet began moving through empty space toward a young, unstable star system near the edge of the galaxy. What are they doing? Keck's theory asked Dr. Yith, who was monitoring their activities. They're destabilizing an entire star, she replied, her voice hollow with disbelief. They're using gravitational manipulation technology to force a premature supernova. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone, they're using their entire fleet as a distributed array, Dr. Yith continued. 15,000 ships, all coordinating to modify stellar gravitational fields. It should take decades, maybe centuries to achieve the kind of stellar engineering they're attempting. How long will it actually take them? At their current rate? 6 weeks. Phase 2 involved what Admiral Chen called aggressive xenoarchaeology. Human science teams began analyzing every piece of predecessor technology they could find, but instead of trying to understand it, they were looking for ways to corrupt it. They're developing viruses, Kixmol reported after reviewing the human research data. Computer viruses designed to infect predecessor systems. But these aren't standard malware. They're weapons of psychological warfare. The viruses weren't intended to disable predecessor technology. Instead, they were designed to force the ancient intelligence to experience something it hadn't felt in 50 million years: fear. The predecessors exist as pure consciousness, Chen explained during a strategy briefing. They've eliminated physical death, material want, and external threats. But they've also eliminated growth, change, and emotional development. They're essentially a 50-million-year-old child with unlimited power. And you want to scare them? Keck's theory asked. I want to traumatize them, Chen corrected. I want to introduce so much chaos and uncertainty into their existence that they realize they're not in control anymore. Phase 3 was where human strategy abandoned all pretense of sanity. We're going to offer them a choice, Chen announced. They can leave our galaxy alone, or we'll follow them back to Andromeda and show them what Deathworlders do to bullies who pick on smaller species. But you said Andromeda was completely consumed, Chancellor Vextar protested. There's nothing left there to save. Exactly, Chen replied, which means there's nothing left there to protect. If the predecessors want to have a war with a species that has nothing to lose, we'll give them one. We'll turn their manufacturing centers into radiation clouds. We'll corrupt their data with chaos algorithms. We'll introduce random variables into every system they control until they're spending all their time fixing problems instead of expanding. Dr. Yitha's tentacles curled into patterns of horrified fascination. You're threatening to vandalize their entire civilization. We're threatening to give them what they gave everyone else in Andromeda, Chin corrected. Extinction. The only difference is we'll make sure they experience every moment of it. The psychological warfare began 3 weeks later. Human virus bombs started appearing throughout predecessor space, each one carrying carefully crafted experiences designed to destabilize the ancient consciousness. Memories of organic death, simulations of true randomness, paradoxes that had no logical solution, and recordings of human war songs that glorified dying for meaningless causes. The predecessor's response was immediate and panicked. Devourer units throughout the galaxy suddenly changed their tactics, abandoning systematic conquest in favor of frantic attempts to locate and destroy human forces. It's working, Chin reported. They're acting emotionally for the first time in millions of years. They're scared, but the predecessors weren't helpless. A massive fleet began moving from Andromeda toward the Milky Way. Not thousands of ships, but millions, each one the size of Coalition battleship. The ancient intelligence was committing everything to destroying the humans before they could spread their chaos any further. ETA for their main fleet? Kextheri asked. 18 months, Chin replied. Plenty of time. Time for what? Chin's smile was answer enough. The humans weren't planning to run, hide, or defend against the predecessor fleet. They were planning to greet it personally. Admiral, Kextheri said carefully, your species seems to have a very unusual definition of self-preservation. Self-preservation is overrated, Chin replied. We prefer species preservation. And, right now, preserving the species in this galaxy means making sure the predecessors understand that Earth has adopted them. Adopted them? As our enemies, Chin clarified. And we take care of our enemies the same way we take care of everything else from our homeworld. We make sure they're properly dead. As the Coalition watched humanity prepare for a war against a 50-million-year-old galactic intelligence, Admiral Kextheri made a note in his personal log. Today, I learned the most terrifying thing about humans isn't their capacity for violence. It's their capacity for making violence seem reasonable. When the predecessor fleet arrived at the edge of the Milky Way 18 months later, they found Admiral Chin's forces waiting for them at the galactic barrier, and the entire Coalition fleet standing beside them. This wasn't part of our agreement. The predecessor intelligence transmitted, its message carrying harmonic frequencies that indicated confusion and rising anger. Your organic allies were to remain neutral while we settled our differences. Admiral Chin's response was broadcast across every frequency. You seem to have misunderstood something fundamental about humans. We don't have allies. We have family. And nobody threatens our family. The scope of what approached the galaxy defied comprehension. The predecessor fleet stretched across several light years. Millions of ships, each the size of a space station, supported by manufacturing vessels that could construct new units during combat. Behind them came the truly massive constructs, mobile worlds converted entirely to weapons platforms, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Final scan analysis. Dr. Yith reported from the Coalition command vessel. Approximately 4 million heavy combat units, 15 million support vessels, and 200 mobile fortress worlds. Combined firepower is... She paused, checking her calculations. Sufficient to destroy every planet in the galaxy simultaneously. Understood, Chin replied calmly. Execute Operation Deathworld. What followed was the most comprehensive act of cosmic vandalism in recorded history. The humans had spent 18 months preparing not just weapons and tactics, but a complete restructuring of the battlefield itself. The star system Chin's fleet had destabilized 18 months earlier detonated exactly on schedule, sending a shock wave of gamma radiation racing toward the predecessor formation at light speed. But that was just the opening move. As the supernova radiation approached, it revealed that the humans hadn't been idle during the wait. The entire region of space between the galaxies had been seeded with what Shin called nastygrams, automated weapons platforms hiding in asteroid debris, disguised as cosmic dust, or simply floating in the void with their power systems dormant. How many weapons platforms? Kextheory asked, watching his sensors light up as thousands of hidden installations powered up simultaneously. All of them, Shin replied. The number was staggering. Over 500,000 independent weapons platforms, each one armed with nuclear warheads, kinetic kill vehicles, or what humans had cheerfully designated as physics violation devices, weapons that operated by exploiting loopholes in universal constants. But the real surprise was what happened when the predecessor fleet opened fire on these platforms. They missed, not because the weapons were particularly evasive, but because space itself had been altered. The humans had spent 18 months using their gravitational manipulation technology to create localized distortions in space-time. The entire battlefield was now a maze of gravitational anomalies, temporal fluctuations, and regions where the laws of physics operated according to human preferences rather than universal constants. They're changing the rules of engagement in real time, Kixmole observed, his holographic form flickering with rapid calculations. This is impossible. You can't just modify the laws of physics. Even if you're desperate enough, and don't care about the consequences, Chen replied. Besides, we're not changing the laws of physics. We're just applying them very, very creatively. The predecessor fleet found itself fighting in an environment where their superior technology meant nothing. Energy weapons were deflected by gravitational lenses. Targeting systems failed in regions where time moved at different speeds. Their manufacturing vessels couldn't function in areas where atomic bonds had been temporarily redefined. Meanwhile, human forces moved through the chaos as if it were perfectly natural, because they designed the entire battlefield around their own tactical preferences. This is insane, the predecessor intelligence transmitted, its harmonics showing patterns that coalition xenopsychologists would later identify as the digital equivalent of panic. You're destabilizing local spacetime. The gravitational effects could collapse nearby star systems. Yes, Chen acknowledged. Isn't it wonderful? For 50 million years, you've been the apex predator because you had superior technology and unlimited time. But you know what you never developed? You never learned to fight dirty. The battle that followed wasn't really a battle. It was an extended demonstration of human creativity applied to the problem of making enemies stop existing. Predecessor ships found themselves trapped in temporal loops, where they experienced the same moment of destruction repeatedly. Others were caught in gravity wells that compressed them into neutron-dense matter. Still others simply vanished as the humans activated devices that temporarily redefined the concept of existence in localized areas. How are you doing this? The predecessor intelligence demanded. Our technology should be superior. We have 50 million years of development. Your technology is superior, Chun agreed. But you made a classic mistake. You assumed that superior technology automatically wins wars. Humans learned a long time ago that wars aren't won by the species with the best weapons. They're won by the species most willing to use any weapon necessary. As the predecessor fleet dissolved into scattered debris, the ancient intelligence made its final gambit. The mobile fortress worlds activated weapons that coalition scientists would spend decades trying to understand. Reality rewriting devices that could alter fundamental constants across light years of space. The humans' response was to activate something they'd been saving for this exact moment. Initiating Project Tantrum, Chen announced. Every human ship in the fleet simultaneously activated their fusion reactor's emergency containment failures. Not explosively, but in a carefully controlled manner that released specific patterns of exotic radiation. The radiation interacted with the gravitational anomalies the humans had created, producing an effect that violated several principles of theoretical physics. They turned the entire battlefield into a region of space where cause and effect operated backward. The predecessor Fortress Worlds found their reality-altering weapons affecting themselves before they fired them. Their targeting computers began providing solutions to problems that hadn't occurred yet. Their crews experienced the results of their tactical decisions before making them. "What have you done?" The predecessor intelligence screamed across every communication frequency. "We've introduced you to something your species forgot how to handle," Chen replied. "Uncertainty. For the next several days, your forces are going to experience combat where nothing works the way it should, where logical decisions produce illogical results, and where your 50 million years of experience mean absolutely nothing." The ancient intelligence's response was desperate. It began uploading itself into every available system, trying to escape the localized chaos by distributing its consciousness across its entire fleet, which was exactly what Sean had been waiting for. "Execute Order Deathworld Final," she commanded. Every human ship released clouds of the nanomachines they developed to combat the original Devourer forces, but these had been modified with something new. Instead of simply disassembling enemy technology, they carried a payload that Dr. Yith would later describe as weaponized philosophy. The nanomachines didn't attack the predecessor intelligence's data or processing capability. Instead, they introduced concepts that the ancient consciousness couldn't process: true randomness, genuine chaos, the beauty of entropy, and what humans called the peace of finally letting go. For a consciousness that had spent 50 million years in absolute control, desperately clinging to existence by consuming everything around it, these concepts were devastating. You're teaching us how to die," the predecessor intelligence transmitted, its harmonics carrying notes of something Coalition xenopsychologists would identify as wonder. "We're teaching you how to rest," Chen corrected gently. "Your species uploaded itself to escape death, but you also escaped the possibility of peace. You've been afraid for 50 million years. Isn't that long enough?" The Great Fleet stopped firing. Across millions of ships, weapons powered down. Manufacturing systems went silent. The mobile Fortress Worlds simply hung in space, their reality-altering weapons dormant. We are tired," the predecessor intelligence admitted. "So very tired. But if we stop, if we die, then our species truly ends." "No," Chen said firmly. "If you stop consuming everything else, then other species get to continue. That's not ending, that's succession. You had your time. Now it's someone else's turn." The final exchange would be recorded in Coalition archives as the moment humanity proved that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's convincing them to choose peace. "Will you remember us?" the predecessor intelligence asked. "Always," Chen promised. "We'll tell the galaxy that once there was a species so afraid of ending that they almost consumed everything. But in the end, they found the courage to rest." The shutdown took 3 days. Millions of ships simply powered down their systems and went dark. The mobile Fortress Worlds activated their own self-destruct systems, converting their weapons into stellar engineering projects that would birth new star systems over the coming millennia. When it was over, the space between galaxies was quiet for the first time in 50 million years. 6 months later, Admiral Kextheri received a personal message from Admiral Chen. "Admiral, the Coalition Council has requested that humanity consider joining the galactic community as a member species. We've discussed this offer extensively, and we're honored by the invitation. However, we've decided to decline formal membership. Instead, we're accepting a different role. Earth hereby declares itself the official guardian of galactic peace. We'll maintain a small presence in Coalition space, but our primary function will be to respond to threats that conventional diplomacy can't handle. Think of us as the galaxy's immune system. Most of the time, you won't notice we're there. But if something threatens the communities we've adopted as family, we'll be there to remind them that this galaxy is under the protection of a species that learned to survive by making extinction itself afraid. We hope you'll never need to call us again. But if you do, remember, humans don't retreat, we don't surrender, and We don't let anyone hurt our friends. The void is no longer empty, Admiral. Humanity is listening. As Admiral Kextery filed Chen's message in the Coalition archives, he added a personal note that would become the unofficial motto of galactic civilization. Today I learned that the most dangerous question in the universe isn't "Are we alone?" It's what happens when we're not. The answer, as the galaxy had learned, was simple. If you're lucky, what happens is that you find neighbors who consider your survival a personal responsibility. And if you threaten those neighbors' friends, you discover that some species don't just fight extinction. They make it a personal enemy. The stars themselves seemed safe for now, knowing that somewhere on the galaxy's edge, humanity was keeping watch.